Tonight, a new series from ABC 57 investigates Broken Heart, the Elkhart Police Saga. For months, we've been digging into shocking accusations of police misconduct and coerced confessions within the Elkhart City Police Department.
Those accusations have led to guilty verdicts being thrown out of court and people walking free from prison. ABC 57 investigative reporter Richard Bodie sat down with Elkhart's mayor and police chief to discuss the situation. Richard.
Tim and Tiffany, right now there are 5 people who have been exonerated in Elkhart, most recently Andrew Royer. And now a lieutenant still employed by the Elkhart Police Department might lose his job.
Carl Conway started with the Elkhart Police in January 1998 and rose through the ranks, eventually becoming a lieutenant. Now, over 20 years later, he's still on the force. One murder case he started investigating in 2003 is now in the spotlight. Conway accused Andrew Royer of murdering 94-year-old Helen Saylor in 2002. Royer got convicted and sent away to prison, but new evidence suggests the interrogation process was flawed. Elliot Slosser, a law professor with the Exoneration Justice Clinic at the University of Notre Dame, explains.
Carl Conway interrogated Andy Royer over the course of 2 days without recording it and coerced him into a false confession.
Andrew Royer spent more than a decade and a half behind bars. Royer's legal team, which includes students from the Exoneration Justice Clinic, uncovered the fact that Lieutenant Conway lied under oath multiple times. After learning the details, Elkhart Police Chief Chris Seymour recommended Conway be fired.
Back in July, I sent the Elkhart Police nearly a dozen record requests, which includes trying to obtain more information on Conway's disciplinary record. This morning, we received the first of those requests. We are working to go through these documents now. But while waiting on these documents, I also sat down with both Elkhart Police Chief Chris Seymour and Elkhart Mayor Rod Robertson. Chief Seymour says he won't stand for this kind of officer conduct in his department.
I can live with mistakes as long as there's ownership, as long as there's a learning curve, because that's what discipline is designed for people to learn from their mistakes. In an instance where behavior is intentional is where I will and I have to draw the line.
In the last 2 years, at least 20 Elkhart police officers have been reprimanded under Seymour, which the chief says ranges from minor verbal infractions up to termination. Elkhart Mayor Rod Robertson wants people to know that city leadership is taking these investigations seriously.
I hate the fact whenever I see our police department being investigated. I like the thought that nothing is being swept under the rug. Everything is being looked at in earnest, and folk are going to be held accountable.
Conway is the 5th person to face termination under Seymour's leadership. Seymour says the other 4 firing recommendations were for policy violations. The city's police merit board has only approved 2. Coming up tomorrow night on Night Team, I'm digging deeper into Lieutenant Carl Conway's personnel file. I'll have a closer look at the other misconduct accusations he's faced in the past. The Police Merit Board will meet on October 6th to decide Lieutenant Conway's fate with the Elkhart Police Department. For now, Richard Bodie, ABC 57 News.
Thanks, Rich, and tune into ABC 57 Night Team throughout the week as we continue our deep dive into the issues with the Elkhart Police Department.
ABC 57's exclusive investigative series, Broken Heart, the Elkhart Police Saga, continues right now. Tonight, we're digging into newly obtained information from Elkhart Police Lieutenant Carl Conway's personnel file.
In our last story, we showed you how Conway lied under oath in a murder case, which led to a wrongful conviction. ABC 57 investigative reporter Richard Bodie obtained that file and shows us what he found. Richard.
This is a copy of Lieutenant Conway's personnel file. In it, there are several commendations and letters of appreciation as part of Conway's more than 20 years of service at the Elkhart Police Department, but there's also disciplinary records. And as we learned, this file doesn't include every time Carl Conway found himself in trouble.
Lieutenant Carl Conway's personnel file is nearly 40 pages long, but there are only 3 pages of Conway's disciplinary record. Those 3 pages refer to incidents where Conway, quote, misrepresented material facts. One incident occurred back in July 2020, where this document says Conway lied about witnessing a detective leave. According to the documents, Conway said he saw the detective leave early firsthand, but he actually viewed it on an internal camera after someone else told him about it. Conway received a one-day suspension. In a letter, Conway defended himself, admitting he didn't witness it firsthand, but did see the detective leave early in the video. In the course of the investigation, the department also found Conway failed to document a complaint in the jail, saying despite his 2 decades as a detective for Elkhart Police, he had never been formally trained to document complaints.
But this file is incomplete because Conway has faced disciplinary action more times. How do we know if it's not in this file? Because it's right here. Chief Seymour publicly listed Conway's disciplinary record in a Police Merit Commission meeting agenda.
Here's some of what Chief Seymour listed. In May 2005, Conway received a written reprimand after showing up 15 days late for a random drug test. In December 2005, he again received a written reprimand for using a fellow officer's PIN number to make multiple long-distance calls to his girlfriend. And in May 2011, he lied to a fellow officer to get another inexperienced officer to attend a meeting about a sex crime unit.
We asked Elkhart Police if there are more disciplinary reports involving Conway. The department did not answer that question, but we were told, quote, written reprimands are not released. I asked the mayor and the police chief if discipline has been a continuous problem at the Elkhart Police Department.
Do you think in the past, though, there has been a culture problem at the Elkhart Police Department?
At times, yes.
I think that there are some concerns inside of the community when I ran, and we're in the process of ensuring that any of that perception that existed before doesn't exist as we move forward in the future.
Coming up this week, as our series on the Elkhart Police Saga continues, Conway isn't the only officer to face termination. This past summer, 2 officers accused of stealing money from an elderly man. We've got their disciplinary records and a closer look at what happened. Wednesday night, I am digging deeper into the lost money in Elkhart. In studio, Richard Bodie, ABC 57 News.
Thanks, Rich, and tune in the rest of this week as we continue our investigation. You can find our previous coverage right now at abc57.com.
We continue our ABC 57 Investigate series, Broken Heart, the Elkhart Police Saga, chronicling problems within the city police department. We have new information tonight on 2 more officers accused of misconduct.
ABC 57's Richard Bodie continues his investigation now. Rich.
Good evening. Back in July, 2 officers, husband and wife, Nathan and Taryn Lanzin, were recommended for termination. They're 2 of 5 firing recommendations Chief Seymour has made since he took over as police chief in the last year. We obtained each of the Lanzins' personnel files through public record requests. Here's what we found.
Taryn and Nathan Lanzin were hired in 2008 and 2009, respectively. Both rose through the ranks, but in June 2020, a complaint triggered an unusual set of circumstances that ultimately led to the pair of officers facing termination. According to their personnel files, Taryn Lanzin responded to a complaint from then 58-year-old Elkhart resident Thad Werno. The Lanzins offered to help Werno with some home repairs because they owned Eagle Eye Home Solutions, LLC, a company they managed to flip homes. But Werno became infatuated with Taryn Lanzin. That's according to text messages uncovered in the course of the internal investigation. Werno expressed interest in marrying her. Over the course of the next few months, Taryn Lanzin exchanged thousands of text messages with Werno and visited him 5 times a week, sometimes while on duty for up to an hour. A professional standards interview found Lanzin did not turn on her department-issued body camera for those visits, nor did she notify dispatch she was on a break. During this time, the Lanzins told Werno the 3 of them could live together and all retire to Tennessee. But things quickly took a turn. A couple months later, in August 2020, Taryn Lanzin gained complete financial control over Werno's accounts. Here's a list of some of what that entailed. Taryn Lanzin became Werno's power of attorney over his medical decisions and his banking accounts. She became the executor of his estate and was written into his will. She obtained large sums of Werno's money for a car and business investments. And the Lanzins also had the deed for Werno's home transferred to them. After learning about this, Elkhart Police Chief Chris Seymour recommended both Lanzins be fired, but the city's Police Merit Commission didn't, and instead a deal was approved. The Lansons agreed to suspensions. Taryn Lanson was given a 60-day suspension without pay and 180 days probation. Nathan Lanson got handed a 30-day suspension and demoted from sergeant to corporal. Both Lansons are now back on the force. We reached out to City Council and the Elkhart Board of Public Safety for an explanation on why the Lansons weren't fired. We were directed to the city's legal department, which sent us this statement. Quote, "The administration fully supported Chief Seymour's decision to bring charges against Taryn and Nathan Lanson and seek their termination from the Elkhart Police Department. However, neither the chief nor the mayor nor any member of the administration has the unilateral authority to fire a police officer for misconduct. Only the Police Merit Commission possesses that authority. The Police Merit Commission is comprised of citizen volunteers from the community. Although the commission found at the disciplinary hearings that the charges and allegations of misconduct were true, the commission determined that the appropriate measure of discipline was something less than termination from the police department. Although we were disappointed by the commission's decision, their decision does not lessen our gratitude for their willingness to accept the responsibility for difficult tasks placed on them. And while we may disagree with the commission's decision, we respect their willingness to step forward and make it." We also reached out to the Elkhart County Prosecutor's Office for an explanation on why it didn't bring criminal charges. In a statement we received from Elkhart County Prosecutor Vicki Becker, she says, quote, "The Lanson case did not have sufficient evidence to demonstrate a crime, but rather a civil cause of action, which is already being pursued," end quote. Taryn Lanson's file also showed she was issued a 3-day suspension in 2017 for immoral conduct. We asked Elkhart Police for more information about that incident. We have yet to hear back.
Now, coming up Monday, we continue our series on another Elkhart police officer, this time under criminal investigation. See the newly obtained documents with what he is accused of. For now, in studio, Richard Bodie, ABC 57 News.
As you just heard, our deep dive into the Elkhart Police Department continues Monday. You can find past stories in this series at abc57.com. Hello again, I'm Tiffany Salome.
And I'm Brian Coneybear. Tonight here at 5:30, more of our exclusive series, Broken Heart, the Elkhart Police Saga.
ABC 57 uncovering new documents related to officers Nathan and Taryn Lanson, who the chief wanted to fire.
But first, what we've shown you so far. ABC 57 first telling you about Elkhart Police Lieutenant Carl Conway, who a court found lied multiple times in a murder trial leading to Andrew Royer's recent exoneration and release. We then obtained Conway's disciplinary records and told you about his lack of training and the other times he found himself in trouble.
Last week, we told you about misconduct involving Elkhart police officers Nathan and Taryn Lanson, both recommended for termination, but the married couple was ultimately suspended temporarily and kept their jobs.
And it turns out Taryn Lanson was also suspended back in 2017 for a very different reason.
ABC 57 investigative reporter Richard Bodie live in studio with his latest discoveries. Rich.
Yeah, Brian and Tiffany, it was only a line in Taryn Lanson's original file saying that she was suspended in 2017, but there was almost no information. Turns out what she was suspended for, police called immoral conduct.
In 2017, Taryn Lanson was issued a 3-day suspension without pay. An internal police document says Lieutenant Lanson affected, quote, "the morale, efficiency, and operation of the department and jeopardized public trust." A professional standards review says Lanson had an inappropriate relationship with an individual whose name is redacted in the documents. That relationship is said to have caused problems inside and outside of the police department. This was the first time Lanson was accused of having an inappropriate relationship. The other incident began last year when she and her husband and fellow officer gained what an internal review called complete financial control over an Elkhart resident.
Now, both Lansons still on the force. Tomorrow night, we have new documents related to Lieutenant Carl Conway and shocking new revelations about what happened inside an interrogation room almost 20 years ago that led to a wrongful conviction. For now, Richard Bodie, ABC
57 News, 19.
Tonight, ABC 57 continues to dig deeper into issues at the Elkhart Police Department that could lead to an officer being fired.
It's the latest installment of our exclusive investigative series, Broken Heart, the Elkhart Police Saga. ABC 57 first launched it after learning about a man, Andrew Royer, whose murder conviction was overturned. A judge found a detective on the case, Elkhart Police Lieutenant Carl Conway, lied in his testimony under oath and likely coerced a confession.
The Elkhart Police Chief and Mayor said they wanted Conway fired, but tonight, a new twist involving Elkhart's top legal expert. We've learned current Elkhart County Prosecutor Vicki Becker was in the room when Conway was interrogating Royer and allegedly coercing a confession, and she still put Conway on the stand.
ABC 57 investigative reporter Richard Bodie talks exclusively with Becker about the prosecution that's led to an overturned conviction and the police chief asking for a detective's firing. Richard.
The Elkhart County Prosecutor's Office put Lieutenant Carl Conway on the stand during Andrew Royer's murder trial. Prosecutor Vicki Becker also sat down with me one-on-one and admitted she was present for at least part of the interrogation that led to Royer's innocence. So what gives? Did Becker know she was putting an officer on the stand that coerced a confession? I'll let you decide for yourself.
After we learned in July that Andrew Royer was found innocent of his murder charge and released from prison, we began digging deeper into what caused his exoneration. We started with Elkhart County Prosecutor Vicki Becker, asking her point blank if Lieutenant Carl Conway coerced a confession.
Do you think Detective Conway coerced a confession out of Andrew Royer?
It's probably not appropriate for me to do that. I can tell you, you know what? I do not believe he coerced a confession out of Andrew Royer. I saw quite a bit of it. It's definitely not what it's being painted to be, but I certainly don't want to make myself a witness in anything. I was in and out of the room. I listened to the audio recording multiple times, and no, I do not believe it was a coerced confession.
Vicki Becker saying, quote, I saw quite a bit of it, and quote, I was in and out of the room, is her saying that she was present for at least part of the interrogation of Andrew Royer back in 2003. But did she tell the courts she was an eyewitness? No.
Well, it's shocking that for 17 years, Vicki Becker prosecuted this case, signed the initiation of charges against Andy Royer back in September of 2003, and withheld from every single court that she was an eyewitness to Andy Royer's interrogation.
Fast forward 2 years. In August 2005, Elkhart County Prosecutor Vicki Becker put Lieutenant Carl Conway on the stand. Conway lied several times over the course of the trial about feeding Royer information and about his knowledge of Royer's mental capabilities. Elkhart's chief of police, Chris Seymour, called Conway's lies, quote, an assault upon the institution of justice, and recommended the Police Merit Board fire Conway. I asked Vicki Becker's office if she knew Conway was lying while on the stand. I also asked for a follow-up interview with her given these revelations. Her office declined. Elliot Slosser is a Notre Dame law professor and works with Notre Dame's Exoneration Justice Clinic. He believes what Vicki Becker did was wrong and believes it puts her track record as a prosecutor into serious question.
For a prosecutor to sit there and withhold the fact that she witnessed this live, Andy's counsel would have had an opportunity to cross-examine her if she would disclose it. And a prosecutor who withholds evidence, that matters. And if a prosecutor would do that in a murder case, better believe they'd be doing it in lesser cases when people aren't paying attention.
Now, Conway was supposed to begin his hearing before the Elkhart Police Merit Commission to decide whether or not he keeps his job tomorrow, but the hearing was pushed to next Wednesday. For now, reporting in studio, Richard Bodie, ABC 57 News.
19.
Tonight, ABC 57-19 continues our exclusive series, Broken Heart, the Elkhart Police Saga, by answering a question many are asking. If Andrew Royer didn't kill Helen Saylor, then why did he confess to the crime?
ABC 57 investigative reporter Richard Bodie spoke to a world-renowned expert in false confessions and obtained deposition video of former Elkhart Police Lieutenant Carl Conway. He's here in studio with the details. Rich.
In the screen beside me, you can see Dr. Richard Leo. He's one of the world's foremost authorities on police interrogations, coercion, and false confessions. He testified as an expert witness in Andrew Royer's case, and we sat down with him to break down the psychology of confessions and what went wrong in this case.
Imagine being in a police interrogation room, being aggressively interrogated or yelled at, lied to, and manipulated for 4, 5, 6, 9 hours over 2 days.
On September 3rd, 2003, Andrew Royer was brought into the Elkhart Police Department to be questioned in the murder of 94-year-old Helen Saylor.
There's a good factual record now, even though the interrogation itself was not recorded.
9 hours of interrogation over back-to-back days by former detective Carl Conway, but only 1 hour of audio exists. We submitted a public records request for those recordings, but were denied, citing confidentiality.
Indicative of a disregard of memorializing the truth, not to record when you were previously recording.
Dr. Leo says Elkhart police stopped video recordings around 1997 after Edgar Garrett, who falsely confessed to killing his daughter, was acquitted of her murder. But with Andrew Royer, there were 2 audio statements, one on September 3rd and another on September 4th.
They'd already charged him with murder by the time of the second interrogation. So the fact that a second interrogation happened is an indictment of the fact that the first interrogation was fatally flawed.
So why interrogate Royer a second time if he already confessed?
He was drifting. He was having a difficult time staying focused.
That was 4 hours into the September 3rd interrogation. We obtained a 2018 deposition video where Conway says despite Royer's mental fatigue, he decided to record Royer's confession.
Isn't it true that you had to remind him that he actually gave a confession to murder?
Yes, sir.
Dr. Leo says some people with mental issues like Andrew Royer are weaker and could break easier under pressure during a long interrogation.
All of us think we would never falsely confess, but the truth is we all have a breaking point.
In Conway's deposition, he appears to be confused about whether or not he knew Royer had a mental illness. At one point, he said this.
Isn't it true that you were aware that he had a disability?
Yes, sir.
But later in the deposition, he contradicts himself.
As of today, I still have no knowledge of him having intellectual deficits.
Now, Dr. Leo authored a 38-page report on everything wrong with Royer's confession, including a sizable number of contradictions.
Some of those are, Royer said Saylor's apartment was cleaned, but it was wrecked. He said Saylor's body was in the kitchen, but actually she was found in the bedroom. Royer said he pawned Saylor's jewelry, but the pawn shop had no record of it.
He got fact after fact after fact wrong in his confession, and that should have been a red flag to any properly trained interrogator.
We asked Elkhart County Prosecutor Vicki Becker if these were red flags to her.
I cannot really comment on evidence in the Royer case because there is a possibility we go forward again.
Royer's attorneys say if that's the case, they're ready.
Detective Conway admitted on the stand he was only ever able to corroborate 2 facts from Andy Royer's confession. 1, that he lived in the building, and 2, that he knew Lana Kanan. And that is an indictment, as clear of an indictment as you can ever get, that the information that was elicited from Andy Royer was false.
Now, in that deposition video, Lieutenant Conway couldn't remember who prepped him to take the stand, but believed that it was Vicki Becker. We still have yet to hear any comment from 11 people and agencies about Becker's comments that she was an eyewitness in Royer's interrogation. Coming up next week, an Elkhart police officer is under criminal investigation and currently on paid administrative leave. We'll tell you what we know about that officer. For now, in studio, Richard Bodie, ABC 57 News.
ABC 57 News, 19.
An unexpected turn of events as embattled Elkhart Police Lieutenant Carl Conway submits his resignation. ABC 57 Investigates has been looking into misconduct at the Elkhart Police Department, including cases involving Conway for the last month in our exclusive series Broken Heart, the Elkhart Police Saga.
ABC 57 investigative reporter Richard Bodie has been following this story from the beginning and has the details tonight. Rich.
Tim, Tiffany, originally Carl Conway was supposed to go before the Police Merit Commission today. That's who decides whether or not he would have been fired for lying under oath in a murder trial that led to an exoneration. But that got rescheduled for next week. Then last night, we told you about more disciplinary documents that we uncovered related to Conway that weren't part of his original disciplinary record in his personnel file, which we, of course, obtained through a public records request. And now, this morning, Conway unexpectedly resigned.
In a statement, Elkhart Police Chief Chris Seymour says, quote, "The objectives have been achieved. I look forward to closing this chapter of the department's history." For more than 20 years, Carl Conway worked at the Elkhart Police Department, 20 of which he served as a detective. But Conway came under fire in the 2002 case of 94-year-old Helen Saylor, who was murdered in her apartment. At the time, Detective Conway accused Andrew Royer of the murder, interrogating him for 2 days despite Royer's mental limitations. According to an Indiana Court of Appeals, Conway fed Royer information, ultimately coercing a confession, and lied on the stand in 2005 about his interrogation tactics. Royer spent more than a decade and a half behind bars before Conway's deceit was revealed. In September, we first told you about Conway's disciplinary record, which includes a lack of training and a pattern of lying. Last night, we told you about a 2012 deal Conway cut to keep his demotion from a sex crimes unit out of his personnel file. We're still waiting to hear back from Elkhart's Law Department on why Conway was removed from that unit.
Chief Seymour has accepted Conway's resignation. It goes into effect this Friday. We reached out to the Elkhart Mayor's office for a comment on Conway's resignation. Their statement reads, quote, "I stood behind Chief Seymour's decision to pursue the termination of Lieutenant Conway. The action Seymour has taken to hold members of the Elkhart Police Department accountable for their actions is exactly why I selected him to be the chief of our police department. I echo the chief's comments that the objectives of the disciplinary process have been achieved, and as a city and as a department, we are committed to a culture of high performance and accountability for the officers of the EPD." We also received a statement from Notre Dame's Exoneration Justice Clinic, which is a student group who helped exonerate Andrew Royer. The statement reads in part, quote, "We are relieved to see the news that Lieutenant Carlton Conway has resigned from the Elkhart Police Department and can no longer harm the citizens of Elkhart. We applaud the city of Elkhart and the Elkhart Chief of Police for seeking Conway's termination. But if they are committed to true accountability, they should seek the appointment of an independent special prosecutor to prosecute Lieutenant Conway for his criminal misconduct and investigate whether any others should face charges relating to Andy Royer's wrongful conviction." For now, in studio, Richard Bodie, ABC 57 News.
Thanks, Rich. And remember, you can head to ABC 57 right now to see previous parts of our investigation into the Elkhart Police Department.
This is Keith Cooper. After accepting a multi-million-dollar settlement for his wrongful conviction in a 1996 armed robbery and attempted murder case in Elkhart. It's the largest wrongful conviction settlement in Indiana history, costing taxpayers $7.5 million. The cost for Cooper? More than 7 years in prison, away from his family, serving time for a crime he didn't commit. Now, Cooper's attorneys say he and others were targets of a rogue group of cops inside the Elkhart Police Department, dating back more than 30 years, known as the Wolverines. And Cooper's attorneys believe the actions of the Wolverines may soon make Elkhart per capita the exoneration capital of the U.S.
I was just told stories about it.
Issues as far as excessive force, brutality.
Everybody deserves justice.
They would lie, cheat, defraud.
And systemic misconduct existed.
Do we want to keep digging things up?
I always questioned everything.
I think I'm done.
Raise your right hand.
This is former Elkhart Police Chief James J. Ivory testifying in a sworn deposition.
I do.
This testimony is the first known record of a former or current Elkhart City official admitting to the existence of an all-white group of rogue cops inside the Elkhart Police Department that targeted minority neighborhoods for years.
Did you come to learn of a group of officers in the Elkhart Police Department who call themselves the Wolverines?
Yes.
Members of the Wolverines have been implicated in violating the constitutional rights of citizens in the Elkhart community, and predominantly citizens of color.
Elliot Slosser is an attorney who has investigated wrongful conviction cases in Elkhart for nearly 15 years. He's part of the Notre Dame Exoneration Justice Clinic, which uncovered the existence of the Wolverines.
Should people question what law enforcement have done in Elkhart over the past 3 decades? Of course.
You can hear him in this deposition questioning the former police chief.
The Elkhart Police Department by 1990 had a reputation or brutality against people of color. Is that fair?
Yes.
This deposition is part of recent legal action to overturn the murder conviction of Iris Seabolt, who was investigated by members of the Wolverines. Court filings in the Seabolt case describe the Wolverines as a white supremacist group targeting people of color in South Central Elkhart in the 90s.
Some of the members used the N-word when they didn't know I was around. Of course, as soon as they saw me when I walked around the corner, the conversation ceased.
Keith Cooper was put in jail by Steve Rizutko, identified by at least one former Elkhart police officer as a Wolverine, according to court records. Cooper was sentenced to 40 years in prison, convicted for a 1996 robbery where a teenager was shot. Cooper's attorneys accused Rizutko of manipulating witnesses with suggestive lineups, withholding evidence which could have kept Cooper out of prison, and deliberately creating false evidence and witness statements. Rizutko later resigned from the Elkhart Police Department following an internal investigation finding Rizutko had paid informants for sexual acts. He died by suicide shortly after learning about the Cooper case being reopened.
Nobody was like, hey, let's go look into those cases and see if the people who are still in prison every day should really have a shot at justice.
Keith Cooper spent more than 7 years in prison before new DNA evidence and eyewitness testimony from the victim saying he didn't commit the crime led to his release. Governor Eric Holcomb granted a pardon in 2017. Then, last month, the city of Elkhart paid an historic $7.5 million wrongful conviction settlement, the largest in Indiana history, according to the University of Michigan Law School Exoneration Registry. The second suspect in the case, Chris Parrish, saw his attempted murder and robbery conviction dismissed because of new DNA evidence and testimony, which led to a $4.9 million payout, after a jury had found Rizutko deprived his constitutional right to a fair trial. At least 9 former Elkhart police officers have been implicated as Wolverines in recent court filings.
The question shouldn't just be who was a part of it and what did they do? Another question should be who knew about it and why didn't they stop it?
During his deposition, former Elkhart Police Chief J.J. Ivory identified 3 men he knew as Wolverines. Bruce Davidson, a Fraternal Order of Police president who went on to rob 24 banks through 11 states, landing him on the FBI's most wanted list. Steve Ambrose, an officer involved in the 1995 killing of Derek Connor, which led to citywide protests. And Ed Winbigler, who went on to become the Elkhart Chief of Police.
They would all stick together, and regardless on whatever the issue might be, made me feel they would lie, cheat, defraud, or whatever it took to uphold their cause.
When Ivory took over as chief in 1990, he had a mission to change the culture inside the Elkhart Police Department.
Issues as far as excessive force, brutality, because of the Wolverines and the various divisions within the department, it was necessary for me to know who I could trust, who I couldn't trust, and to make sure that they were in fact abiding by our rules.
People wrote in to the Elkhart Truth, accusing officers of taking prisoners to the city dumping ground for interrogation. Fed up with the way Elkhart police treated the South Side, a 1992 arrest at the Washington Gardens public housing complex ended with as many as 200 neighbors throwing rocks and bottles at officers.
It was a very volatile time, and emotions were running rather rapid and rather high.
Over the years, the Elkhart Police Department has kind of taken it on the chin a few times.
Chris Seymour took over as chief in 2020 under similar circumstances as Ivory, tasked with changing the culture of the Elkhart Police Department.
Now I looked at it as an opportunity to steer the boat in not so calm waters.
Seymour became chief after EPD faced a 97-page report from the Police Executive Research Forum, commissioned as a response to this video. 2 Elkhart police officers beating a man handcuffed to a chair. The incident led to then Elkhart Police Chief Ed Winbigler to resign. Winbigler one of the alleged members of the Wolverines, identified by J.J. Ivory, a group Seymour says he never encountered in more than 2 decades with the Elkhart Police Department. Had you ever heard about it?
I'd heard stories.
What'd you hear?
Same thing you're saying. So, yeah, we'll stay away from that one.
Protect and serve shouldn't be just a slogan. It should be something that they can feel.
Elkhart Mayor Rod Robertson admits changing the culture inside the department and building trust with the community is no small task.
When you did hear about an officer or any of the police department being heavy-handed in one way, shape, or form, it reverberated inside of the community.
The department followed suggestions from the PERF report to update its use of force. Every officer is now outfitted with body cameras and squad car cameras, and EPD has created an online reporting system for the public. The stats suggest there has been significant progress. According to the Elkhart Police Department, criminal arrests in 2021 jumped 46% from the year prior, while use of force dropped, and complaints on officers went down by nearly 1/3.
There's no finish line. It's an ongoing process for us. We're constantly evaluating and reevaluating everything that we do.
This new administration with the mayor and Chief Seymour is a bright light in an otherwise dark system of injustice. And I hope that the chief and the mayor continue taking efforts to fix things moving forward.
But Chief Seymour didn't appreciate the line of questioning regarding the Wolverines.
Do we want to keep, digging things up, or do we want to acknowledge that maybe mistakes were made or procedures were not in place to effectively do things? And now we have them in place and we're doing things what we think is right.
He made it clear past misconduct isn't something he's focused on.
Yeah, I think I'm done.
Well, and just to clarify, I mean, you're saying it's past, but Jay Cooper was in jail up until very recently.
I don't want to live in the past. Okay? I can't answer for what people did 30 plus years ago.
So what is being done today for people put in prison by members of the Wolverines? And if there was a pattern of misconduct, what is being done to investigate possible wrongful convictions for people still sitting in prison? Nothing.
Do you believe that the city should review any cases involving officers that were implicated in potential misconduct?
Not my job.
The city, county, and Elkhart Police Department all said they will not reopen cases or review past convictions that involved officers responsible for any of Elkhart's growing list of wrongful convictions. Elliot Slosser wants to see an independent prosecutor appointed to review potential cases of past misconduct, specifically involving members of the Wolverines.
We're not counting on a system that has protected itself for 30 years to somehow say, oh, we're going to do things the right way and look backwards.
Everybody deserves justice. That's what I would tell you. And nobody deserves to have their character assassinated because they made mistakes or whatever. They answer for their individual stuff, and that's nobody else's to answer for. I don't have a time machine. I can't go back and fix all this.
My job is to move forward. My job is to make sure that the administration that I have and the police chief that I have is applying the law appropriately. We will be there to assist whatever we are asked to assist in, but it's not our job and nor my administration to investigate past administrations or past police chiefs or any of those things. It's not my job.
There are 2 pending federal civil rights lawsuits from overturned convictions that could lead to more settlements. And there are 3 pending post-conviction cases that could lead to more exonerations. While the city and county both said they won't proactively review cases involving officers with a history of misconduct on the job, both said they would comply with any legal action that comes their way. In all, Elliot Slosser tells Night Team there may be as many as a dozen cases filed to overturn potential wrongful convictions.